Welcome to Torah Today Ministries. My name is Grant Luton.
And I'm Robin. And it's been a while, Grant, since we've done a breadcrumbs episode.
Our daughter just said, "Are you two going to teach anymore? I haven't heard any for a while."
I don't know why it's been a while, but it has. And the last time we closed off, I introduced the fact that we were going to have some young guests. And they were going to be some young people who would join us. And unfortunately, they weren't able to come this week, but hopefully next week.
Yes.
So in the meantime, Grant, what is it we're going to have a discussion about today? I'm very excited about this.
Well, it's something I've talked about in my Sage Advice series called what we're going to talk about is Pirkei Avot. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the tractates in the Mishnah, which is part of the ancient commentary on the Torah and Jewish thought and so on.
So far, what you've said, it makes
no sense.
Well, it sounds very highbrow and irrelevant, but that is so far from the truth.
No. Let me just put it this way. The Mishnah has to do with how we obey the commandments. It has all these details about how Orthodox Judaism approaches the commandments. But there's one tractate in there that doesn't have any commandments in it. And it's called Pirkei Avot, which means the verses of the fathers or chapters of the fathers, or some translate it the ethics of the fathers.
Who are the fathers?
Well, these are the sages of Israel, the great sages. We have Akiva and Hillel and Shammai, Gamaliel, who was Paul's rabbi. And these are just wise sayings, nuggets of wisdom.
Just practical, timeless wisdom for the ages, which is why we look forward to this time every year.
Yeah, because traditionally, Pirkei Avot is studied during the 7 weeks between Passover and Pentecost, or Shavuot. And so what we enjoy doing is every evening during these 49 days, we open up Pirkei Avot and we read a couple of these or 3 of them and discuss them. And it's always so fun. We always look forward to this every year.
Well, you know, this time of counting the omer, which might be new for some, but it's simply a measure of grain, correct? An omer. And it's counted between the time of leaving Egypt, the Passover, and then approaching Sinai, which I know you just said, but as we put our little markers down every night, I see it as a journey.
Yes.
Not only a journey that we're remembering and celebrating, but it's a journey that we're embarking on. And I know for me and for you, we consider this an opportunity to prepare ourselves for that encounter at Sinai.
That's right.
For Pentecost. I read something really cool in one of the books about Pirkei Avot, and it explains that if you go to an art museum and you see, let's say, an original work by Rembrandt, you will say maybe something like, wow, this does justice to Rembrandt.
Yes.
And it's obviously not everything about Rembrandt. It's obviously not a complete evaluation and representation of that artist. But you know what it does? It shows what he's capable of, and it shows what beauty he can create. And when I read the Ethics of the Fathers, I'm reminded that God wants to impart in us wisdom and beauty so that when people see us, they'll see a little glimpse of how beautiful the Creator is.
Right.
So
these, if I can just insert here, these nuggets of wisdom that these men are recording here, they're not just things that came out of their own heads. These came out of long lives of study, of practice, of walking with God, serving Him the best they could according to the light of His Torah.
It's not like inspired scripture like the Torah is, but it's definitely divine wisdom.
It is.
It really is.
Definitely is.
It brings to mind a verse from Isaiah 43. It's in verse 21. It says, "This people which I formed for myself, they shall relate my praise." And that's His desire for His people.
That's right.
So that is one of the reasons we love just looking at these, talking about these, and every year we revisit them and have new perspectives. So should we just jump in?
We should. Now, there are 6 chapters in Pirkei Avot. They're very short chapters. But what we're going to do is limit our conversation today to just the first 3 chapters. And then we want to do a part 2 of this.
Probably because it's been really hard to pick just
it
a
has.
few favorite verses.
And you don't know which ones I picked. And
No.
I don't know which ones you picked.
I'm really curious to see if
I
we
did.
overlap.
So these might come out in different order, but we're going to start with just chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I picked one right up at the very beginning. So I'll start with this,
Okay.
and then you take one. And we're not going to give the name of each rabbi who we're quoting, because sometimes these names rattle on. Rabbi so-and-so, son of so-and-so, son of so-and-so, heard someone who so-and-so say this.
Which is because they're always careful to cite their
Yes.
sources and credit the wise men who say
Right,
things.
right.
And we appreciate that. But just for the sake of
time.
Okay. So speaking of time.
Okay. So here's one that comes early in chapter 1. It says, the world depends on 3 things. Torah, or study of Torah, service, that means service of God, and kind deeds. In Hebrew, it's gamilot chasadim, where acts of chesed. Now, when you think about that, Torah, service, and then kind deeds, this kind of becomes a roadmap for every time, for every day for me. I want to study the Word to know what God's instructions are. Then service, I want to do them,
Very important.
but then I want to do them with the right attitude, with the right spirit, and that's with gamilot chasadim. I want to do good deeds with chesed, which is loving kindness. So there's the instructions, there's the obedience, but then there's the motive of selflessness in carrying them out.
Right, right.
And it says the world depends on these things. Imagine a world where there were no people doing these 3 things, living this way.
No people doing it?
I mean, imagine a world
Yeah.
where no one was living this way.
Well, I kind of feel like there aren't many today. And when you name those 3, I doubt that many people on the street would name any of them as very important
That's true.
for life. And I picture a 3-legged stool, Grant,
Yeah,
because a
that's
3-legged
right.
stool is one that doesn't tip easily.
That's right.
And God says, this is what supports my way
Yes,
of life.
So true.
That is so cool.
That to me, I think, belongs right up front in chapter 1 and is very foundational to the rest. So, Robin, what have you picked?
Well, I narrowed it down to a few in the first chapter, and I chose make for yourself a teacher, acquire for yourself a friend, and judge every person meritoriously. And I really love that because it just speaks to the heart of what makes life rich.
Okay, read those again.
First one, make for yourself a teacher, and then acquire for yourself a friend.
So, a teacher and then a friend.
And then when you judge people, judge them with merit, like
Okay,
favorably.
Favorably.
Yes,
Judge them favorably.
yes.
Give people the benefit of the doubt.
And I started thinking about how important it is not to be hyper attuned to what is not okay.
Yeah.
Because that's what we tend to do.
Yeah.
And we see the negative not only in the events of the world, but in the people in our life. And God says, look at the whole picture and the whole person and be gracious.
Well, you know, when I was teaching school, it was frustrating for me for the first few years. And then there was a speaker who came in, and he said something I've never forgotten. I quote it all the time. He said, catch them being good. Because I was catching them being bad. But then when I started catching them being good and then acknowledging that, judging them favorably, kids started behaving better. And so that's what this verse is saying to us.
And when it says to acquire yourself a teacher, first of all, be in learning mode
Yes,
all the time.
all the time.
And then it also speaks to the idea of being very intentional to search for those who you want to be like.
Right.
And to spend time with them. Because as we've talked about, you become like those you spend time with, and those that you allowed to be intentional teachers, particularly of the word, it's just a big deal.
Yeah.
It really is. And I found a quote that I love about the whole idea of studying with another, because I know it's tempting to think, well, if I sit alone and read and study, that's good enough. But there's real merit, Grant, to submitting to a teacher. First of all, it requires humility, and it requires that you're teachable, like I mentioned. But listen to this. It says, when two people study together and discuss their spiritual condition, then there are two godly souls battling one animal soul. So
great.
it's like, get together and partner up with someone to beat up on the part of you that needs to go.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Isn't that
So
cool?
true. Yes, very true. Something I should have mentioned early on in our discussion is that these sayings, though they were written down maybe the 6th or 7th century, we're not sure quite when, they were memorized and they were quoted often for hundreds of years before that. In fact, I know Brad Young, a Christian commentator on the New Testament scriptures, says that he has counted where Pirkei Avot is quoted more than 100 times in the New Testament.
That's just amazing. So, in other words, these sayings were just part of the mental furniture
Yes.
of the people who we read and
For
who write
example, I just made a note of this and I skipped over it. That first one I read, that the world depends on three things. There's your Torah study, then your service of God, and then kind deeds.
Right?
Well, think of 2 Timothy 3:16. Paul would have been aware of these.
All scripture is
Given by inspiration of God. So your scripture, what's it profitable for? For your teaching, your reproof, and your correction. So there's your service. Instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be completely furnished for every good work. So you see it kind of following the same trajectory.
So that it changes you and you can touch people with kindness.
Yes.
That's
right,
really great.
right. Are we ready to go on to another one?
I guess we could
Okay.
camp out, but let's do it.
Well, I know that this is one that's going to be on your list because we love this one, and we even have little wall plaques with this on it. And I will give the name of the rabbi, Rabbi Hillel, who's very well known. He said, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? And if I am for myself alone, what am I? And if not now, when?" 3 questions.
This was the first verse of the ethics that really penetrated this was
kind
long.
of gasped at the first time
I
you read
did.
this.
It was years and years ago, and I just couldn't believe it because it says so much.
In 3 questions.
If I am not for myself, who will be? In other words, I have to make sure that I take responsibility for my own soul. Yeah. I can't depend upon anyone else for my growth, for my maturity, for my spiritual growth and balance. But if I'm just for myself alone, what good is it? Who am I? What am I?
Right.
So that in itself
You have to
is
see
a
yourself in the
balancing point.
context of people.
You do. But then to cap it off, if not now, then when?
When are you going to get started?
In other words, this is the time.
Yeah.
And if you're really serious about anything, you're ready to do it now. You're not going to procrastinate and make excuses. In the Ethics from Sinai,
which is
volume,
a commentary on
yes,
Pirkei Avot.
regarding this verse, it says, if at any time a man deems himself completely heavenly or spiritual, he has in effect made himself into an idol. But if you deny yourself all physical pleasures and attempt to reject your basic humanity, you are climbing too high. You are imagining yourself a deity. If you are all spirit, you lose the common touch and will share nothing with your fellow human beings. In other words, what you consider yourself as is going to affect the way you connect and affect other people.
Yes.
And it has to be something that transforms you, or it's useless.
Yes.
And now is the time to allow that transformation to happen.
Yes.
Does that make
Now,
sense?
Yes. If you take out any one of those 3, the whole thing collapses. It's another 3-legged stool.
Yeah.
So it is 3 brilliant questions. We talked about the power of questions recently, and You'll notice that if you read Pirkei Avot, so many of these begin with a question.
Yeah.
And then they answer the
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
But this just asks 3 questions and leaves them hanging.
Wow. We've had long conversations with friends over that particular verse, and it's
Yes.
really, really great.
Well, do you have anything else from chapter 1?
I do have one more
We'll go right
that
ahead.
I found. It's by Shammai. It says, "Make your Torah study a permanent thing. Speak little and do much, and receive every person with a cheerful countenance."
I had that one on my list too.
Oh my goodness. Study just really needs to be fixed and consistent, doesn't it? It can't just suit my mood or my convenience, or it doesn't happen.
That's right.
So if we deem it as necessary and important, and when we say Torah study, we're talking about the word.
The whole word of
The
God.
whole
yes.
word of truth. And then what that's going to do is it's going to cause you to see other people worthy of your kindness.
Yes.
And what that's going to do is it's going to be reflected in your face.
Yes. Well, I remember you shared with me a rabbi who said that your hands and your face are public property
Right.
because your hands belong to everybody to help them, and your face belongs to everybody.
But-
so that because
Yes.
it's the windows of the soul, your eyes are.
And you don't see your own face. Other people see your
No.
face. And you can read a person very well by just looking in their eyes.
And think of how selfish it is when there's a group of people are talking and happy and cheerful, and then someone comes to the room, just a long face,
It's awful.
sourpuss, and all of a sudden, all the tension's on them. And they kind of suck the air out of the room. So instead of contributing to the good spirit,
quality
in the room,
of their
they
joy.
they
Yes.
subtract from it.
Yes, yes.
It's
Well,
no.
it starts with the people we live with, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Why do we always feel entitled to be the grumpiest with the people that share our house
Yeah.
with us in our family? It's like they can handle it and they need to handle it because I don't feel happy right now. And that's just not fair. It is not fair not to be a happy person.
Well, I remember, I think it was C.S. Lewis, who years ago I read this, and it kind of changed my attitude about home. Mm-hmm. Because he talks about how we always pray as we leave the house to go to work. No, God bless me today. Help me be a light to the people I meet. But how many of us pray that prayer when we come back in the house in the evening?
Or before we get out of bed. You know? Dennis Prager wrote a book that I enjoyed years ago. It's called Happiness is a Serious Problem.
Oh, yes.
And he's a great commentator, as many of you know, and he devotes one day a week on his podcast just on the subject of happiness.
That's great.
Because it has the power to elevate our life level so very much.
Yes, so true. Well, I'm going to share my last one from chapter 1, which kind of goes along with the one you just shared. It says, love work. And that's a hard one for me. But love work, despise lordliness, and do not become overly familiar with the government.
Wow, interesting.
So love work, despise lordliness, do not become overly familiar with the government. And I started thinking, what is the opposite of those 3? It would be to hate work, to love being in control, and then to be a brown noser. Always to see what you can get out of people who are in leadership.
Right. The Proverbs warns you a lot about even sitting down at a table to taste the delicacies of somebody who really doesn't care about you, but they just want to exert power over you
Exactly.
because then you're at their mercy. Like, don't even eat it. Don't
Right.
fall for it. Be very, very careful. We're all at risk of being kind of seduced by power and the ability to control. It's just a thing that's human, and we need to work to overcome it.
And we are to find our security and strength in humility, and to pursue humility at every opportunity.
And regarding work, it's tempting to misunderstand that work was part of the curse. when
Well,
Hashem,
I'm going to disagree a little bit.
Well,
I don't think work was a result of the curse. I think the sweat was.
well, that's what
part
I'm
of the curse.
saying.
Okay.
We misunderstand.
Oh, yes.
That work is part of the curse.
Right.
When Hashem placed Adam and Eve in the garden, he gave them something to do because we were created to be productive.
Absolutely.
It's the resistance to our work that was part of what we suffered at the fall.
And then what does Paul say? We were created for good works
work,
in Messiah Yeshua. We're created for work.
And everybody craves knowing that their life matters.
Yes.
And when you live a life of leisure, which has become the goal in the West, unfortunately, like the richer and the more successful you are,
More empty your life
the
is.
more empty your life is, because you start to buy leisure time and you start to feel emptier and emptier. And it's this vicious cycle of meaninglessness that people think, well, I've reached the top and I'm unhappier than ever.
Yeah.
When the fact is just the basic, simple meaning that we reach in life when we engage in the world around us and bring positive change is what gives us joy.
Yeah. And so many people work for years and years and years, and their goal is retirement.
Their goal is to do nothing. That is so
Now,
ridiculous.
I've retired twice, but as always, to start to something else. So I'm all for retirement, provided there's another work to start on the other side of
Well,
that
when
retirement.
you balk at work and joke about it, you love to work hard. It's just yard work you don't like.
Yard work is part of the curse.
When he sees a shovel or a rake, he gets really sweaty and nervous.
Okay,
but
I think we need to move on.
he loves the books.
I think we need to go on to chapter 2.
Okay.
I think there's something about respecting and honoring husbands in
Oh,
this.
well, I'm just
teasing.
clarifying that you're a hard worker. It's just a particular kind of work that
I
makes you
just
nervous.
don't get it. I just don't get it. You go out, you mow the yard and rake the leaves and clean it all up, and 3 months later, you got to do it all over again.
Well,
So
same holds true for making meals and making beds, but we won't. We'll talk about that
Yeah.
later off the air.
we'll talk later.
All right.
Why don't you start off chapter 2?
All right. In chapter 2, I selected a verse that says, a boor, now this is like a B-O-O-R, like a boorish person, cannot be sin-fearing, nor can an ignoramus be pious. The bashful one cannot learn, nor can the short-tempered teach. Neither can all who are much occupied in trade become wise. And in a place where there are no men, strive to be a man.
Love that.
I know.
I'm always challenging with young men I meet with that.
When there is not a man or a woman,
Strive to be a
stand
man.
up and be a grown-up. In other words,
Oh,
be
read
an
the-
adult.
Read those first 4 parts again about the boar and the
Sure.
ignoramus.
Sure. A boor cannot be sin-fearing, nor can an ignoramus be pious, or what would we call
Obedient.
All right. A bashful one cannot learn. And
Now,
we need
why
to-
is that?
Well, what do you think?
They won't ask questions.
Right, because they're afraid that if
Yes.
they ask a stupid question, they'll be judged. And what is that? That's pride.
Yeah. And then the next one, it says that an angry person cannot teach.
That is fascinating.
And that's because they are frustrated by other people's questions.
Or they're teaching not to serve the listeners, but to control the listeners.
Yes.
And that is a big, big difference. And then it says, don't be much occupied in your trade or in seeking money, or you can't become wise.
We're to work, like we were saying,
Mm-hmm.
but work can never be our lives.
Well, the pursuit of wealth can't be our
Yes.
lives because it's elusive
Yeah.
and empty. And then the last part of it, which we mentioned, and in a place where there are no men, strive to be a man. Talk about that a little bit more. I mean, that is just a powerful, powerful statement.
Well, I think of some of my great heroes in history and in American history. And they were always men who never set it out as their goal to be a hero. But they found themselves in a place where someone needed to stand up and lead. And they weren't pursuing leadership. But when there was a need for someone to stand up and say, we need to do something, They stand up, they give wise counsel, and then they lead with courage. And these are the ones I admire so much in history. I think of a guy in the Civil War named Chamberlain who was a school teacher, for Pete's sake. But because of his act of heroism, he was placed in a place where he had to lead. Mm-hmm. He was the instrumental figure who won the Battle of Gettysburg.
I think if I was still schooling my kids, a great course of study would be to find the people in history who were put into positions of leadership when they didn't really want to be there because of their character, and they brought great change.
Yes.
And you know what I was thinking about too, Grant, is this counts when no one's looking. Like, strive to be a man even behind closed doors. Yes. Because as it has been said, if you want to know what a person's true character is, it's what he does when no one's watching.
Yes, for sure. Yes. Well, our time is getting away from us.
All right.
I'm going to go to this one.
Okay.
The day is short. The task is abundant.
Yep.
The laborers are lazy. The wage is great. And the master of the house is insistent.
Now, this is one I chose as well. So
Okay.
finally we overlap. Yes. Read that one again.
Okay. The day is short. In other words, our time in this world is very short. The task is abundant. Like Messiah said, look, the fields are white for harvest. There's plenty of work to do. The laborers, the master said, are few. Pirkei Avot says the laborers are lazy. And I think in this Laodicean period that we live in, there are a lot of lazy laborers. Mm-hmm. The wage is great. I don't think we could even begin to imagine the reward there is for people who serve God in this life. Mm. And the master of the house is insistent. He's saying, please stand up, be a man, be a woman, do the work I've given you to do. The time is short.
So this rings familiar. Didn't the master say,
very similar,
the harvest is great,
yes,
and the workers are few?
Yeah, exactly.
So don't be apathetic. There's just too much at stake.
That's right.
There's just too much at stake. Wow, that's a good one.
Do you have another one from chapter 2?
I don't. So what else did you select?
Oh, this one's so good.
Okay.
Then we'll go to chapter 3 real quick. Treat his will, God's will, as if it were your own will, so that he will treat your will as if it were his will. In other words, if we put his will first, he'll put our will first. So treat his will as if it were your will, so that he will treat your will as if it were his will. Nullify your will before his will, so that he will nullify the will of others before your will.
Wow.
It's almost a riddle, but as you unravel it, it's really profound wisdom. And it's all about nullifying our own will when it conflicts with his,
right,
and putting his will above our own, which is exactly what Yeshua did, exactly what he did.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but
You're going to put me on the spot.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have any other examples of Messiah quoting these verses at hand here? I know you have lists and lists. Do you have any other examples that just come to mind?
Well, coming up in the next episode, the Golden Rule is one where Yeshua is quoting one of the Pirkei Avot verses, but he puts a little twist in it.
Okay.
But we'll save that for next time.
Sure.
Because that's
Sounds
the one
good.
that always, since you put me on the spot, that's the one that always comes to mind.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Chapter 3. We'll
Chapter
take about
3.
another 4 or 5 minutes.
All right.
Robin, do you have one?
Yeah. The one I chose from chapter 3 is anyone whose good deeds exceed his wisdom will endure. But anyone whose wisdom exceeds his good deeds, his wisdom will not endure.
Ooh, read that one more time.
Anyone whose good deeds exceed his wisdom, his wisdom
What
will
does that
endure.
mean? His good deeds exceed his wisdom. So he doesn't know the Bible as well as maybe other people, but he's full of good deeds. So his good deeds are greater than his understanding of the Bible.
But his wisdom counts.
Yeah, of course.
Right. But anyone whose wisdom exceeds his good deeds, his wisdom will not endure. In other words, he is all about collecting understanding and knowledge, but it never affects his character, and it doesn't affect the way he lives his life. And I think of James, where he says, if you claim you have faith, but you don't have the works to back it up, then your faith is dead.
There you go. Yeah. Is there more to that one, or is that the whole thing?
He used to say, anyone who the spirit of people finds pleasing, the spirit of God finds pleasing. But anyone who the spirit of people does not find pleasing, the spirit of God does not find pleasing. Wow.
Yeah.
And then it says, the sleep of the late morning, wine at midday, children's conversation, and sitting in the gathering places of the ignorant drive a man from the world.
Because he's wasting his life.
Well, some of the sages say that these mentions of morning, midday, and old age denote youth, middle age, and then old age. In other words, one should not just kind of sleep their youth away and not be alert to what matters, and then just kind of drink away their middle age, as in, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, sort of thing. And then this is the interesting one. When you get older, the tendency is to be less active and have more conversation. But this verse warns against prattling away, even in your old age. Don't let your conversation be idle. Because by then, your words should be very few, and they should be very selective and important.
Yes, that's so good.
Isn't that good?
Well, it is. I've got one here that answers the age-old controversy between the Calvinists and the Arminians.
Oh, brother.
Do we have free will, or is God sovereign and just makes everything turn out the way he wants? And this is what it says. Everything is foreseen, yet the freedom of choice is given. Everything is foreseen, yet the freedom of choice is given. In other words, they're both true.
Yeah.
So does God run the world? Absolutely. He's absolutely sovereign. Do we have free choice? Absolutely. So make wise choices.
And can both be true at once.
Yes, they
Absolutely.
can.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yes, I love it.
And there are people who plant their flag in one camp or another and talk about prattling away with idle conversation. And allowing that to just be an obstacle to loving people and learning from people and being a friend to people. How ridiculous.
Well, it's funny because I didn't read the whole thing. But since you said that, listen what the second part is. The world is judged with goodness, and everything depends on the abundance of good deeds. So it's God's judging the world with goodness. He's moving everything towards a happy ending. He serves the best wine last, doesn't he? And everything depends on the abundance of good deeds. So make wise choices. Because God is wise, you be wise. He's making choices that lead toward a happy ending. So do good deeds that bring about a happy ending. So that your free will and God's sovereignty are moving the same direction.
What I love about Pirkei Avot, among many things, is the fact that it doesn't require us to sign up for a college course and get a degree. It doesn't require us to go to another place to learn from people who have degrees. And it doesn't require us to do something complicated. All it requires is for us to make the most of what God has given us in our life here and now. And he says that is the key to a rich and meaningful life.
Yeah.
I love it.
Pirkei Avot takes all this wisdom and hours and years and decades of study that the sages have done and distills it down into something that we can grasp and put in our pocket.
So if
love it.
this is new for you and you've never heard of it, you can go online and access these sayings. There are many books that you can order, but I encourage our listeners to really get some copies and begin to discuss these with your family. And if you've read them before, dig deeper.
Yes,
because
that's
there's
right.
always more.
And there are tons of commentaries the rabbis have written
It's
on
endless.
Pirkei Avot. And if you're wondering how Pirkei Avot is spelled, it's Pirkei, and the second word is Avot, A-V-O-T, or some will spell it A-V-O-S. So just type that into Google and you can find free copies of Pirkei Avot online.
Great. And we'll continue our count. We don't have much time left.
That's right.
What day is it in
Today's
our count?
32, I think.
So it won't be long, and we will be approaching Shavuot.
Yes. So until our next, our part B of Pirkei Avot,
Right.
we wish you shalom and may God bless.
Shalom, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for today's teaching. If the work of Torah Today Ministries has touched your life, please consider making a donation or sponsoring an upcoming video. As a video sponsor, you'll have an exclusive opportunity to memorialize a family member, celebrate a special event, or simply support the ongoing creation of similar content. Your tax-deductible contribution helps ensure that our teachings continue to reach all who are longing for truth. Click the link or visit our website to learn more.